So, in an universe such as ours, typically on multi-target fights, you'll find that fire, like on this fight, a fire spec is probably going to serve you better than an arcane spec. But, that said, you might say to me, Ian, fire is a bullshit RNG spec and I hate playing it. And I'd say, you know what, you're right. Fire is a bullshit RNG spec and I hate playing it too. So maybe you want to play arcane on this fight. That's cool. And maybe you don't want to use the crystal, because, the tanks move them around, they jump around, it's kind of really annoying. So what are you going to do? Alright, you're going to turn to Orb Nether Tempest. So let's see here. Pre-pot, get to 4 stacks. You can use the Orb to get you up there quickly, which is kind of nice. So at this point, it's not totally dissimilar to Crystal. You keep Nether Tempest up at 4 stacks. You missiles, you blast. You refresh Nether Tempest as it's going to go down. Remember, due to the pandemic effect, you can actually refresh Nether Tempest up to 3 seconds before it falls without any actual loss of time on it. So at this point, a lot of the rules are pretty much the same as the Prismatic Crystal Supernova build. Like, you don't want to use missiles unless you're at full arcane charges. You want to use them, period, if you have 3, so you don't waste procs. Right now I'm in the conserve phase again, so that's all the same, right? Like, at the start of the fight, you're going to burn down and get your evocate off, and then go into this conserving phase. Now, one of the awesome things about Ice Flows as a talent here is that while I'm moving around these dumb plates, I can lose absolutely no DPS, because I can just cast while moving. So it's really nice on the whole. When you have 2 targets like this sometimes, when you drop your stacks, you can just hit Orb, and you'll immediately go up to 4 stacks again, like this. See, I'm back at 4 right after barraging, which is pretty awesome. When you're this spec, you don't have to worry so much about the crystal, but you will, when Evocate is coming back up, still want to burn yourself down. Now, as encounters flow, you're not going to have the same pure DPS that you do as a Runa power build. And you're not going to have, without the crystal, the same pure single target that you're going to get from your Supernova crystal build. But this spec is undoubtedly harder to screw up. When you drop your stacks, you can just Arcane Orb and you get them back. So it's a much safer bet, I would say, for DPS. There's less ways to horribly screw it up. Because if you screw your crystal up, you're really screwed on your damage. It's like 30% of your damage, right? So if you lose one, you're really screwing yourself, whereas that's harder here. See, right here, I evocate after burning down, and I'm back in my conserve phase. So I would say that this sort of spec, for a lot of fights, like I use it on Beastlord Darmak Mythic, for example, this exact same spec, and it's a safe bet. And you're still getting pretty good, like, decent damage, I would say, on the whole. Like, I'm sitting at, what, like 42k here? And nothing too, totally awful. Obviously, because of the movement, it's not going to be quite as high as Gruul or something, right? And with the Disrupting Roar and the Stampers going on. But it's really not a terrible spec. So here, my Arcane Power is coming up. I'm going to get ready to pot, and 40 seconds on Evocate means that, I can't really start burning immediately, but, it is what it is, as they say in numerous NHL interviews around the world. So at this point, I am going to burn down a little bit, but remember, the thing about having the Orb around is that you can drop your stacks and then Orb, and at least get some of them back relatively quickly. So it's not quite as big a thing. When you're playing Arcane Orb, you can it's much more forgiving, I would say, as far as your stacks go and your mana. So here I'm burning down, I'm at like 50% or whatever. My Evocate finally comes up, Evocate to full, and continue from there. Now the fight is ending, so I'm probably not going to drop my stacks a whole lot here. And again, the Ice Flows is incredibly useful for stuff like Stampers. Just make sure that you bind it on something very close to your damage spells, and you can basically just cast while moving for days. I mean, not for days, but you can get a decent amount of it off. Like, the amount of DPS you're losing is going to be much lower than something like Blazing Speed or Evanesce, which are your other options on that tier, right? So, I mean, on the whole, Yeah, I would say this sort of play is safer. On these two target fights, though, for Hands and Franz specifically, like, I would definitely, if you can hack a fire spec, I would use it. But, you know, it's not for everyone. Some people want to play Arcane, right? So this is just kind of how you would go about it if you're going to play on a more mobile fight as Arcane spec. Because, I mean, Arcane, no doubt, it does suffer on these kind of mobile fights, and it really shines on the single target, but it can be done, definitely.